Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. This is Isaiah Yeshayahu, Introduction to Chapter 53, Part 2. In the last intro, we laid out 8 basic ideas that Yeshayahu has been telling us until now that are very important for us to understand and internalize in order to understand Chapter 53. Today I'm going to go through those 8 again, but this time I'm going to go through them with the source material from Yeshayahu until now in order to fully develop the ideas and develop the support from the text for these ideas. So the first of the 8, well, I can list the 8 first real quick. Let's go through them one by one. The first one is the idea that the nations of the world chose to punish the people of Israel, or not so much punish, but chose to make them suffer and oppress them much more than God had in mind in the first place. And for all of these source texts, it will be impossible for me to bring everything, but I'm going to bring many. If you think of others that I missed, then that doesn't mean I neglected them. It just means that I went through as much as I could, but clearly there's more. So first, let's look at Yeshayahu Perek Tes. That's chapter 9, verse 11, where Yeshayahu says as follows. And here he's talking about where it says Aram Mikedem, that the people, from Aram, the nation of Aramea, Syria, came from the east to Plishtim, and the Philistines came Me'achor from behind, meaning from the west. Vayochlu es Yisrael b'chol peh, and they attacked the Israelites b'chol peh, with all of their mouths. And if you recall back then, we explained b'chol peh is to emphasize that they didn't just attack like they were supposed to, but they attacked with their entire mouths, with the desire to devour them, much more than they were asked for. If you go on to Yeshayahu Perek 10, the 10th chapter, verses 5 here through 7, God clearly talks to the Assyrians and says, Asher Shevet Api, Asher Assyria, you are the staff which I chose I allowed the Israelites under your hand to oppress them. However, all I wanted was for you to attack, to take over, to be in charge. However, but they, the Assyrians, it says in verse 7, he didn't want to just become the overlord over Judah, but rather he wanted to destroy, he wanted to make suffer. So the Assyrians plowed down on the people of Israel much, much, much more than they were asked to. If we look back at chapter 5, verse 5, we see a similar idea where God, that was after the song of the vineyard, where God compared the Jewish people to a vineyard. And he said that instead of giving me of the trust and faith that you should have, and instead of setting up a nation that was just and righteous, right? You didn't, and you set up a nation that of vice and oppression. And what did God say He was going to do as a punishment? He said, what am I going to do to my vineyard? I'm going to take down my protection from the vineyard, and then it will become destroyed by the people out. I'm just going to take the fence down. God didn't say that He was going to tell everyone to come and destroy it. That was what they decided on their own to do. If we look at chapter 9, Perek Tes, we see a similar idea. Perek Tes, verses 2 to 3. Ki in verses 3, Kies ol subalo, yes mateshich mo shevet hanogespo, the stick of the one who is oppressing him, hachitosa kiyom Midyan, comparing the Midianites and saying how they struck the Israelites. So in other words, again, it was their choice. If we look at chapter 47, coming a lot closer to where we are now, much farther in the book, I think this is a crucial idea. Remember, I'm just picking examples just to display the idea that God made it clear that it wasn't, and here at 47:6 is where God lays it out really, really clear. He says, Kotzafti alami, I got angry at my nation, Chilalti nachlosi, I allowed my portion, my people, Israel, to become profane. V'yatneim biyadech, God is speaking to the nations of the world, and I put them in your hand. I allowed them to be placed in exile in your hand. However, lo samto lahem rachamim, you chose not to give them mercy. Al zakein, on the elderly, hichbarata uleich me'od, you made much stronger, much heavier the yoke of oppression, much me'od, much more than I asked. Vatomri lo olameh gevaris, and so on. Ad lo samta ilal libech, you didn't care about this. Lo zacharta achiso, you didn't care about what the consequences of that punishment you were going to place upon them. So this presents the first idea. The first idea, and that is that God allowed the nations to oppress, but the nations themselves chose to oppress much more. Now let's see idea number 2. The second idea was that the nations will be ultimately punished for the suffering that they meted out against the people of Israel. Now there are so many examples. It was hard for me to pick which ones, but let me go through a bunch of them. First, let's look at chapter 10, verse 12, where it says, "V'haya ki yivatza Adonai es kol maseh b'Artzion Yerushalayim, efkod al pri godel levav melech Asher." I'm going to punish the king of Assyria, right? Ki amar b'koach yadi asisi, because he said that it was me that did all of this. He took all the credit for himself. I'm going to punish him. And if we keep looking on, right? V'haya or Yisrael eshu kedosho lehava, that the lights of Israel will be like a flame that he will get, that because he will get punished because of the way he treated Israel. And then it continues, no longer will they be under, the people of Israel be under the oppression of the Assyrians. So it demonstrates here very clearly that the Assyrians will be punished for those deeds that they did. If we look at chapter 13, verse 3, this is another really important one. Over here, God is talking to the Babylonians. He says, "Anitzu vesi limukudashoy kam karosi giborai liapi alize gavosi." That I commanded those that were holy to me, right? And this is that they should bring the message to Babylon. It's important if you have a chance to go back and listen to our podcast on verse 13. And that continues, that theme continues all the way through 14:1. Chapter 14, I'm not going to read the whole chapter 13 here, but it says that eventually the Babylonians will suffer. Why? Because God will have mercy on the people of Jacob. Again, that same idea, that the Babylonians will be punished because of the way they treated Jacob. Then if we look at chapter 15, verse 32, here God was talking to the nations of Moab. And over here, God talks about the punishments that's going to be meted out against the people of Moab. I'm quickly going to turn to verse 32. I'm sorry, that was the mistake. I must have copied down the wrong verse. But let me move on to 16:1, where we have we're still discussing Moab there. Shilchu kar moshel eretz misoab. When God says what should Moab do to redeem themselves, they should once again become friendly with Israel. They should once again bring tribute to the kings of Israel. Shilchu kar moshel eretz misoab midbar el har bastion. bring back tribute to Zion, make peace with the people of Israel. Again, the punishment of Moab coming because they refused to make peace with Israel. If we go to 17 verse 3, 17 verse 3, V'nishbas mivtzar me'Ephraim u'malachim midamasak Yisharim kechod b'nei Yisrael yiyu. This is talking about Damascus, the Syrians. That in the honor of the people of Israel, God is going to punish the people of Damascus. If we go to chapter 19, this goes on and on and on, over and over and over again. God addresses the other nations and says what's ultimately going to happen because of the way they decided to treat the people of Israel. If we look, I'm going to skip a couple that I have written down here, just because I think I've already made my point, but there's a few that I want to pick up closer to the end, closer to chapter 53. 41 verse 12, I'm going to punish those people that oppress you, God says, all of those nations. And when you're going to look for them, you won't be able to find them because I will destroy them. Those who waged war against you will be like nothing. It said, and they're the ones that will be embarrassed and ashamed at the end because I am God, and so on. 41:16, I'm going to get rid of them, and you are going to rejoice in God. And then really quick, one more, 47, verse 6. Hazolim, I'm sorry, 47 verse 6. Well, which we kind of just read last time, that I'm going to be katzafti alami chilalti nachalasi, that name biyadcha. I'm going to place them back under you, those people that are making you suffer. So again, the nations are going to suffer in the future because of what they chose to make punish. The idea number 3 was God made it very, very clear that the reason why he's punishing the Jewish people is not because of anything other than their own sins. We're going to go back all the way back to chapter 1, straight up in the beginning, verses 4 to 5. You are a nation of sinners, Am Keved Avon, Zera Miriam, and so on. Al Metu Ku Od, why is it that you're going to be punishment? Because Od Tosifu Sarah, because you continue to neglect me, you continue to rebel against me. I can go on and on and on, but over and over and over again, God makes it clear. I just want to I'm going to skip a bunch of them just for the sake of time. But in chapter 42, verse 24, getting a little closer to where we are right now, God makes it very clear. Mi nasan lim shisa Yaakov Yisrael avozim. Who is it that gave over Jacob and Israel to her oppressors? Halo Adonai. It is God. God gave them over because we have sinned to him. We did not go in his ways. So we went on and they did not listen to his Torah. That's why that's why God made them suffer. And then in chapter 43, and I'll stop with this one for this idea, chapter 43, verse 24, we have the same idea laid out very, very clearly. Why is it that the people are suffering? Because of your sins, that's why I punished you. So that's idea number 3, that the people are suffering for their own sins. Idea number 4, that in the time of redemption, what's going to happen? God is going to take those nations who are humble, those nations who are willing to recognize God, and bring them close. The entire world, whoever is ready to recognize God. If we go all the way back to chapter 2, verses 2 to 4, we again have this idea very clearly written out. Many, many nations will come and say, let's go up to the mountain of God, El Beis Elohei Yaakov. Let's go listen to the God of Israel, which again is the idea, which is actually category number 8, which I'm going to get to soon, that it's Israel that brings that message. And the nations will bleed their swords into plowshares and so on. That's going to be the ultimate redemption. And then if we look in chapter 10, Yeshayahu made this very clear again in chapter 10, verses 20 Let's just turn to there for a moment. What is it going to happen? In that day in the future, they will no longer have to be under those that are striking them, and Vinishanda will rely on God. And if you continue reading through over there to verse 33, Hine God will humble the arrogant nations, and He will uplift the nations that are humble. That's when chapter 11 happens, when the Messiah comes, and so on. Reading all of those verses, especially 1 through 9, where God says, "V'lo that the entire world will be full of knowledge, everyone, all the nations." And then again in verse 10, He will stand as a sign to all of the nations. All of the nations will come because Israel is bringing that message to the world. In other words, the humble will be uplifted and the arrogant nations will be brought down. The supports that I just said support the idea number 5. That in 4 was that in the future the arrogant will be punished, right, and the humble will be uplifted. And number 5 is the idea that those that are humble will be internalizing the message of God. And I'll just bring 1 or 2 proofs for that. 43 verse 9, where Isaiah makes it very clear and says, all the nations will gather together. They will all become righteous. They will all say the truth, and so on. Then there's the idea number 6, which I am going to say that one of the things that the nations of the world are going to struggle with and have been struggling with all the time is that if this is true, that the Jewish people, the people of Israel, were suffering so, but they didn't deserve it. In other words, they were sent because of their own sins. However, God allowed the oppressors to oppress much more than they deserved. This is a concept that's very difficult for them to comprehend, because if you think about justice, you think about everything should happen the way it should happen. People should get punished only like they deserve. It shouldn't be okay for us to be able to oppress them. This is a concept which completely confused the nations of the world. Like I said earlier, this is what I believe was the confrontation between Yeshayahu and the people of Edom when they asked, Shomer Mami Lailav, Shomer Mami Lail. If God is a guardian, where is He in the times of darkness? And Isaiah told them it's okay to ask those questions, but know that those answers you will never have. And if we see there's many other places where Isaiah makes reference to this, to the fact that the nations have found it difficult to accept. I'm just going to bring you a few. If we look at chapter 40 to 14, Et mi no atzve avineu. How can I teach the ways of justice? How do we teach that the nations are treated in ways that we don't understand? How can we teach the nations these ways? It's just describing this confrontation between Isaiah and the prophet and the message of God and the people who are constantly asking, then why did they suffer so? Why does this one suffer so? Ask questions that they simply don't have answers to. In that same chapter 40, look at verse 27. Lama Tomar Yaakov Utdaber Yisrael. Why should Jacob say, Nistera Darki Me'adonai Elohai Mishpati Yavar? Why is it that Jacob doesn't understand? Jacob should understand. Halo Yadata, do you not know? Imlo Shamata, right? Don't you know? In other words, the Jewish people are supposed to know. That whole chapter 40 is emphasizing this idea. The Jewish people are supposed to know and understand, not that they know and understand the reasons of God, but they know and understand that they have to be, as that chapter ends, they have to be able to hope in God, even though they don't know and don't understand the answer. But the nations find that very difficult to understand. We see that again in 41 verse 20. I just want to read that to you. that in the future, L'man yiru v'yedu v'yasimu v'yaskilu yachtav, so that in the future everyone will know and understand ki yad Adonai. So this is all from God, even though until now we did not understand, we didn't get it. U'kadosh Yisrael b'ra'ah, and so on. I would like to point attention to just one or two more places. Let's look to 45, verse 9, and I think I'll leave it at that. It's talking about you're coming to your Creator. Can you approach the Creator? Can the clay approach the Creator and say, "Why are you building me?" Can a person go to his father and say, why did you give birth to me? Why did you bring me into this world? These are questions we cannot ask of our Creator. So that's the idea number 6, that this confrontation where the people don't understand. It never made any sense. Why was it that these people are suffering? Why was it that these people are suffering? So why is it that I'm allowed to? It must be I'm allowed to oppress them because they're supposed to be oppressed. And then I would like to refer to this one. I'm not going to read you everything, but I'm just going to emphasize that repeatedly, over and over again. I don't know how many times, but at least 40 or 50 times throughout this entire book, God has referred to the people of Israel as Avdi, my servant Yaakov, in a singular language. Avdi, my servant Jacob, Avdi, my servant Israel, and choosing them as my servant. God has used that language repeatedly over and over and over again, to the extent that that is the definition of Avdi in the entire book, is my people. And then, of course, the idea that the bearers of the message of redemption to the world will be the people of Israel. And I have like a list of 50 references, but in order to stop belaboring you with so many references, just remember Nasaticha la'or goyim, which we stated, which language that Isaiah has already used twice to tell us that the purpose of the people of Israel is to bring this message, to be a light unto the nations, to bring the message of justice and righteousness, to bring the message and idea that we don't understand the ways of God, but despite that, we still have to hope for Him, and we have to remember that ultimately redemption will come. So these are the 8 ideas that are absolutely necessary and essential to understand that Yeshayahu has been teaching us in order for us to approach chapter 53 and learn and understand it. Thank you so much for listening. Looking forward to studying chapter 53, which we are about to do.